Hello, and welcome to the Bible for Worship at St. Paul Lutheran Church on this fourth Sunday of Easter, when our first reading is written in the book of Acts, chapter 9, verses 36 through 43. Now in Joppa there was a disciple whose name was Tabitha, which in Greek is Dorcas. She was devoted to good works and acts of charity. At that time she became ill and died. When they had washed her, they laid her in a room upstairs. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, who heard that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him with the request, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter got up and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the room upstairs. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was with them. Peter put all of them outside, and then he knelt down and prayed. He turned to the body and said, "Tabitha, get up." And she opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand and helped her up. Then calling the saints and widows, he showed her to be alive. This became known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. Meanwhile, he stayed in Joppa for some time with a certain Simon, a tanner. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In our 3-year pattern of readings, our lectionary, the Easter season each year devotes the first reading of the day to the book of Acts. In that way, during this season, the Church remembers and traces and particularly celebrates the spread of the resurrection news. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. And here, in the 9th chapter of Acts, we have a chapter devoted in its first portion to the Apostle Paul, and in the latter portion here to the Apostle Peter. And the focus of these various stories about Paul and Peter are that those who follow Christ and who would be leaders in the community undergo both calling and empowering by the risen Christ. So the first part of the chapter is about Paul's being called on the road to Damascus, where he hears the voice of Jesus asking why he is persecuting Jesus, and then calling him through the community in Damascus to become a proclaimer of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Here in this latter part of chapter 9, we see Peter being empowered as a leader of the community. Just before the passage that we're reading today, Peter is brought to an individual named Aeneas who has been paralyzed for years and bedridden. And Peter says to Aeneas, "Jesus Christ has healed you." This is not Peter becoming a Superman or gaining a superpower. This is Jesus Christ working through Peter, who is empowered with the Spirit and the life of the risen Christ. And now in this story, Peter is called to Joppa, where Tabitha lives. And in the encounter with Tabitha, whom those around her have declared dead, they have washed the body. They have laid it in the upper room. But they have sent for Peter, saying, "Come quickly to us." And he does. And when he does, he repeats what Luke has told us back in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 8. Jesus did, Luke 8:49 to 56. And that in itself already echoes what the great Israelite prophet did in 2 Kings 4, especially verses 32 to 36. This is the pattern of God's power working in the community. And so Peter comes into the room, limits the number of people who can be there present when this happens. He takes Tabitha by the hand and he says, Tabitha, rise. Just as Jesus in Luke 8 had said, Talita, rise. Talita meaning little girl, Tabitha here being the woman's name. And then that technical term, and he raised her. The same word that Luke uses in Acts chapter 2, verse 24, that God raised Jesus from the dead. This is a scene in which we see God's power in Christ flowing through the apostles and preparing them for all of the ministry and growth of the church that will follow. The very next chapter, Acts 10, we'll see that Peter goes to Caesarea, a seaside place, a place from which Paul will set off on his journeys. And in that jumping off point, Peter will encounter a Gentile named Cornelius and bring that entire Gentile, non-Jewish household into the community of Jesus. It will go to Caesarea and beyond. And they will go with credentials as apostles of Jesus and with their capabilities established through these stories of miraculous events. One commentator has said that Luke loves miracles, and in many ways, the bigger, the better, and the more, the merrier. And whatever it is that we might make of healing and raising someone to life in antiquity, we also know that Christ's power lives in the community gathered around his name and the meal that he gave us, and that amazing things can happen in this community. Many will come to believe because we testify, we tell of those amazing things, and we give credit to Jesus and to God as being the source of that power. And indeed, the growth of the kingdom continues. God bless.